Okay, last time we talked about ratios, rates, and proportions. Okay, and remember the method that we use to solve a proportion. Well, we can use proportions to solve some application problems. Okay, so here's an example. Mike's car can travel 163 miles on 6.4 gallons of gas. How far can it travel on a full tank of 14 gallons of gas? Okay, so in this section, they're all going to be problems to be solved by using proportions. But when you get to the test and the final, or life, the question is, how do I know if I can use a proportion to solve this? Because if we can use a proportion, it makes the problem so easy to solve because that gives us our equation. And that's what's hard to come up with is the equation. But how I know it's a proportion is the proportion or the problem is going to give me some full information about something. He can go 163 miles on 6.4 gallons of gas, but then it's going to ask me a question about a different amount. Okay. So the great thing about using proportions is it doesn't really matter how you set it up. First of all, Mike's car can travel 163 miles on 6.4 gallons of gas. Notice that I should recognize that as a rate right away. Okay, and I'm going to make a proportion. It asked me about a different amount of gallons. As long as I put the gallons in the same place down here, right, then I can solve it for the miles on 14 gallons. Okay, so the great thing about these is it doesn't matter if, now usually on miles and gallons we want them in this order, but if I would have written my ratio upside down, it doesn't matter as long as I put the corresponding units in corresponding places, right? Because notice I'm going to cross multiply here. I'm going to get 163 times 14, 6.4 times x. Here, 163, 14, 6.4x. Yeah, so it doesn't matter. Once we set one of them up, however we want to set it up, then the other, and just make sure it corresponds. Okay, now I'm going to solve it using cross multiplication. 6.4x needs to equal 163 times 14. Because I've got a decimal here, it really doesn't help me much to do that shortcut we talked about last time. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply out this 163 times 14 because I'm going to have to divide that number by a decimal. Okay, so 163 times 14 . 4 times 3 is 12, 24, 25, 4, 5, 6. And then 1 times 163, that's nice. 2, 8, 2, 2. Okay, so now I have 6.4x equals 2,282. Divide by 6.4. So I'm going to come over to the side and say divided by 6.4. I've got to move that decimal one place. So I'm going to move my decimal one place here, which means I'm going to add a 0. Okay, so 64 doesn't go into 2, doesn't go into 22. So let's try, and remember, I am now dividing by 64. I moved that decimal. And I don't know how much it goes into 228, but I know 6 goes into 22 3 times, so let's try that. 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 6 is 18, 19. Let's subtract and bring down. 6 goes into 36 6 times, but I know that's going to be a little bit too much, so let's try 5. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 6 is 32. Let's subtract and bring down. 6 goes into 42 7 times, but again, I know that's going to be a little too much, so let's do 6. 6 times 4 is 24. 36, so 38. Let's subtract and bring down. Let's see. Okay, again, I know that it goes into 36 6 times, but I know that's a little too much, so it'll be, let's try 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, I can stop here only because my problem says round to the nearest mile. So now I'm able to round, right? I'm looking at the nearest mile for rounding. That's 5 or larger, so that's going to go up. So my answer is X is, let's do this approximately, right, is approximately 300, excuse me, 357. Now, is it miles or gallons? Round to the nearest mile, right? What did it ask? How far, how many miles can it go on 14 gallons? Okay, or I could have got it from here. Oh, my X is going to be miles, but I need that unit on there. Let's try it again. A newspaper report says that 7 out of 10 people surveyed watch the news on TV. At that rate, and it tells us that's a rate, how many of the 3,200 people in town would you expect to watch the news? Okay, it gave me a rate, 7 out of 10. So also, that's a clue, it's a proportion. If it tells me I've got a ratio and a rate. But then it asked me about a different amount of people. It tells me about 10 people, but then asks me about a different amount. Okay, so this is 7 people watch out of 10 total people. I'm just putting this in so I can keep my proportion straight. So the 3,200 people is the people in town. That's the total people in town, and I'm looking for how many watch. Just make sure that you get your proportions set up appropriately. Okay, and then we've got 10 times X equals 7 times 3,200. Okay, so 3,200 times 7 0, 0, 14, 21, 22. So we have 10x equals 22,400. Divide everything by 10. That's a pretty easy one. Okay, so now we know that x equals 2,240 will watch, right? And what is this? It's still people, but it's people that will watch. Okay, we could have used our shortcut here. Okay, wouldn't have shortened much because that 10 makes everything pretty easy. But for those of you that are interested, if you're not interested, block your eyes. Avert, avert. Okay. And then I could have just canceled this and only had to multiply 320 times 7, right? So that gave us a little bit of a shortcut. But because I was just multiplying by a couple of zeros versus 1 0, not too much. Okay. All right, one more, I believe. The nutrition information on a brand cereal box says that a 1/3 cup serving provides 80 calories and 8 grams of dietary fiber. At that rate, again, it's telling me, oh, it's giving me a rate. How many calories and grams of fiber are in a half cup serving? Hey, this is asking me two questions. At that rate, how many calories are in a half cup serving? And at that rate, how many grams are in a half cup serving? So I've got two separate problems to work here. Okay, so 1/3 cup provides 80 calories. 80 calories. So I'm going to do the calories first, right? So then the question says, at that rate, how many calories are in a half a cup? So I've got to put the half cup on top just to match where the 1/3 cup is. And I'm looking for calories. All right, so I have a half times 80. Let's do our x first. It doesn't matter. 1/3 x equals a half times 80. Remember what this is. This is an of. Half of 80. You could go over and do the math, but that's half of 80. Remember when that word of is between two numbers, it means multiply. So I can also do the opposite. And if I have a multiply between two numbers, I can say half of 80. So I know 1/3 x equals 40. Now to solve this equation, I'm going to get rid of that fraction. So I'm going to multiply by 3 so that I know that x equals 120. Okay, and what is that? Calories. So a half cup serving is going to give you 120 calories. Okay, what about now the fiber? So 1/3 cup gives us 8 grams of fiber. And the question is, how much is in a half cup? So that tells me I've got to put the cup here. If I would have written this upside down, I just put the 1/2 in the corresponding place. It doesn't matter. So 1/3 x, cross multiply, this times this times this, equals half of 8. Well, half of 8 is 4. Getting rid of that fraction in my equation because I have an equal sign and only because of that. Then I know that 1x is 12. So 12 grams fiber. All right, so using proportions to solve applications. Let me know if you need anything.